Hi everyone, it's Marianne and welcome to Happy Paper People. We are back for part 3 in our series of Make a Journal Start to Finish. So if you have not watched part 1 and part 2, I will go ahead and link them in the description box. Part 1 and part 2, we're putting the cover together with book board or chipboard and covering the spine, covering the inside of the spine, putting either an eyelet or a ring on there if you want to be able to hang something on there. Okay, so that's what we have done so far. So part 3 is going to be assembling and putting our signatures in. This is the one that I did, that I'm doing in our live version of Make a Junk Journal Start to Finish. The entire thing. So if you want to see the longer version, check out the lives. They are Monday Jumpstart, starting June 6th. And of course the title says make a journal start to finish. And part 1 and then part 2 is the following week. And we did the same thing, put the cover together and the inside. And then we are doing a hidden spine. So we took this is what we're going to do today with the yellow one. We're going to assemble the 3 signatures. We're going to bind them into our hidden spine. Then we're going to attach the hidden spine to the book so that they are good to go, just like that. So super easy, but if you've never done it before, I know it can be intimidating, not even knowing where to start. So we're going to put the book aside for a minute because we don't need it right away. What we do need is 3 signatures worth of paper. So I have 3 signatures clipped together here, and we are doing 10 pages in a signature. You can do less, you could even do more if you want. I wouldn't typically recommend doing more than maybe 12, maybe 15 at the most if you like a really big mouth. But we made a 2.5-inch spine. We're only doing 3 signatures with 10 sheets. That gives you plenty of room to put lots and lots of stuff in and still not end up with a huge gator mouth, but it will be very full. So examples of paper. There are, in Happy Paper People, I uploaded a whole list, a huge long list of different types of paper that you could use in your journal. And we've talked about that on some of the lives. So I won't go greatly into depth on that because that list is in there, that you can come into Happy Paper People and find that list. But I will show you what I put together today. All 3 of these signatures are pretty similar. And because I'm going to use this for another idea book, I'm not wanting to use my very best paper. I'm not wanting to use my favorite things, and I'm also wanting to use some things that are sturdy enough that I can put lots of things in the book because it's an idea book. So I'm staying away from vellum and onion skin and very lightweight, very old, brittle types of paper that I absolutely love in a journal. But because I want to be able to maximize the space in this one and put something on every page in my idea book, I'm going with good old sturdy paper. This was in a splat box, and I had a stencil over it. That's all that is. So coffee dyed paper. This also was in a splat box. I sprayed the doilies and got that. This is from a 12 by 12 scrapbook paper pad, and they work just fine. Measure 8.5 here. I've trimmed everything to be 8.5 by 11. Measure 8.5 here, fold it up. You've got instant pockets, and then I just cut off the part on the side. More coffee dyed paper. Thought it would be appropriate to put some eco dyed paper. So there's 1 sheet of eco dyed paper in each of these signatures, since the cover is all botanical. Coffee dyed paper. I do really like this braille paper, and it is basically 10 by 10. So I had a couple inches to fold up here and cut just a little bit, tiny bit off the end to make it 11. That didn't sound right. 10 by 10 and to make it 11. 10 by 12. Okay, so this was actually just in a splat box, so it has very little on it. And that one is coffee dye. So just some basic papers, nothing fancy for me here. That's another splat box. The same type of thing in all three of these signatures. So let's put them aside and work with one. Now, there is one thing that I will say here that I'm not doing that I did on the live when we put these signatures together. If the paper is coffee dyed, great, I leave it alone. But if the paper has, say it's a piece of scrapbook paper, like this one right here. Piece of scrapbook paper, I've folded it up to make a pocket, trimmed it off, it's the right size, but the back is just bright white, glaringly white. I will often just grab some stencils and some vintage photo and a brush like this and just go to town, you know, just taking the bright white off of it. Just a little bit. I'm not concerned about a perfect pattern. I don't want a perfect pattern. I just want a little bit in the background to take the take that bright off. I might go around and ink the edges. You know, I did the entire back, so when I fold it up, there's a little something in the front as well. There's another one that is a piece of scrapbook paper, so same thing. Just did different. I try to use a different stencil on each one within the signature, so it doesn't look like the same thing just all the way through. I put some on the back of this. This was a splat box, and a lot of it you can see through because it's, you know, just thin copy paper. But I did put a little bit because there was a lot of just white space there. Excuse me. So this was just a doily stencil, and I was trying out some different products, something that had glitter in it right here on this side, which I don't really care for. But it'll probably get covered up. But it was pretty with the purple and the bronze. Went really well with this cover being a purpley gray. But again, I missed that one. I would normally put some stenciling on the back. There's some stenciling on that one. And on the back of that one, the inside of this one, it's the same as the other one. Now, the other thing that you can do is grab a piece of cardstock to wrap around and make a cover, basically a cover for each signature. It just gives you a little differentiation in where the signatures are, and probably more importantly, it gives you another place to put pockets and tucks and paper clips and things like that. So, just realized that I did not grab the cardstock for this one, so I may look to see if I've got some right here. If not, then we may skip it. Okay, so I have put together 10 pages, 3 signatures with 10 pages. I think we already went through this, didn't we? Yes, we did. Okay, so the other thing that I'm going to need, so I've got that ready for a signature, I'm going to need the hidden spine to attach it to. Now this is the back of a paper pad. That's all this is. It's very thin, but it's thicker, heavier than cardstock, but it's thinner than the chipboard I've used to make the book. And I show you that because for this one, I really don't want it as thick and heavy as the chipboard that I used to make the book, because I don't want it to stand up and be real obvious, and you'll see what I mean. This piece is 2.5 by 8.5, where the piece that we made the spine with was 2.5 by 9. I don't want this to go all the way to the top of the book, but I do want this to go as long as the signature is. And I know that the signature is 8.5 high. They're all 8.5 by 11. So I want the piece to be 2.5 by 8.5, and I'm going to cover that with a coordinating paper. I like to cover it with the same paper that I used on the inside of the book, so that when I cover that and then glue that in, you don't even see it. It looks like it's just part of the book. And that is the hidden spine, because the binding is behind here. It's glued in, so you don't see it in here, and you don't see it out there. It is quite hidden indeed. Okay, so how do we glue this on? You can use regular glue. You can use a double stick tape. I've got one right here, and I want to make sure that it's dried so we can sew it right away. So I'm going to go ahead and use this double stick tape. Like I mentioned last time, when I'm putting double stick tape on something like this, I like to go all the way around the perimeter because, excuse me, I want to make sure that it is adhered right up to the edge. And so I can ensure that by making my first, if it's glue, I'm going to put glue right up, right up around the perimeter. But then you have to be careful because it, goes oozing out all over the place depending on how much you put in and what kind of glue and all of that. So I will, I also like double stick tape on something like this, a good quality tape, because it doesn't leave any lumps. Sometimes I'll use a glue, but then I'll take a little silicone spatula and spread the glue out just to make sure that it is evenly spread and just doesn't leave lumps. This one is really not that critical because you really don't see it. It's the spine, the signatures are sewn into it, so it's covered. I mean, it really is covered, so you really don't see it. But if I make it a habit to always do the things that I don't want lumps with in a certain way, then I make sure that I always do them, whether it's really necessary on that one or not. So, okay, I'm going to take the tape off of this. Now, the piece of paper that I'm going to cover this with, that's a scrap that I had cut off from making the cover. I guess I should have set it down and shown you. I didn't even have to cut it because scrap is just about the right size, but actually it's not. I didn't cut it because it's about the right size, but it really is not. So I am going to trim it, and I'll set this down without the sticky down so that you can see what I mean. What I want is to be able to set this down, and I want about a ½ inch all the way around. I don't have a ½ inch on the top and the bottom. I can probably make that work. There's probably just enough to wind it around. It needs to go around so that I won't see it. So then when I turn it over, I always see is the yellow, and the sides are yellow as well. So it is too wide, so I need to cut it off here, and it is really not quite tall enough. Let me see if one of the other scraps will work. I don't know if that one is that branding strip. Can't tell if it's perforated. It is perforated. Okay, so I wouldn't want to leave a perforated branding strip on there. If it wasn't perforated, I might be able to use that as part of the paper just to wrap around. But let's see if I were to use this one instead. I can get my ½ inch up on top, and I've got a ½ inch close enough on the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and use this one and take a pencil and get our official measurement right here. Yeah, that's enough on top. I'm just going to cut it right there. Okay, so let me just set that down for a minute. We'll get rid of this one that I thought looked to be the perfect size. It was a great width, just not tall enough. So let me throw these guys away. And just grab a small paper trimmer right here. And I'm just going to make sure that that's on the line and cut that off. That'll work. Okay, let's leave that and put the paper trimmer away. Not leave the paper trimmer and throw the paper away. Okay, so yeah, nothing directional there. Didn't fold it up anyway, and it's not going to show even if it was. So, all right. So I'm going to take my 2.5 by 8.5 that is either covered with glue or covered with double stick tape, and I'm going to turn this sideways just for ease of setting this down. And I'm going to set this down so that I'm trying to get it, basically centered. So I have the same amount all the way around to wrap around. Okay, and then I'm going to burnish that down, and I just as well burnish it from this side so that I don't take a chance of ruining the paper from the other side. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to give it just a little bit of a bend just to get that paper thinking about rolling around the side when it's time, because it's time. Okay, and I really don't want a thick paper here. It's gonna crack. It's gonna be a problem. It's just thick. It doesn't need to be a thick paper. That's why I like what I put on the inside of the end paper. You could put a contrasting paper if you want, but I like it the same because then you just don't even see that spine, and it's really truly a hidden spine. Okay, so I'm going to use the same double stick tape. The first one I'm going to lay down is going to be right up close to, right up against, possibly even tiny bit underneath, but right up against that card that is there for the spine. And the reason for that is when I wrap it around, that being so close to it is going to connect to the side of the card and give it adhesive on the side as well as it wraps around. Because I'll want it to be stuck down really well. Okay, so I'm going all the way around it, all four sides, and putting one. Oops, I forgot to do one thing. I heard you. I heard you screaming at me. We'll go back and do it. Yes, I did hear you. I forgot to miter the corners. Over here doing the tape, and I'm like, something's wrong. Something's wrong with these. They look funny. Okay, we're going to miter the corners. Basically, you can just cut them straight across. I'm going to use this little miter tool that I have here. And we are working on bringing these available to everyone. Working on getting a set of them, a set of 3 that would be, they're 3 different thicknesses based on what thickness of card you are mitering. The thicker you're mitering, the thicker this card is, then the more space you need between the corner of it and where you cut, because you need to have enough paper to wrap around it. The thinner it is, the closer you can get on that. And you certainly don't need a tool. Most of you have been doing it for many years without any kind of a tool. But just mark that. That's super easy, and I know that there's going to be, I'm hoping the tape doesn't get all sticky on me. Good. There's going to be plenty of paper, enough paper. Okay. There's 2. Yeah, I should have done this before I put that tape down. Now we're not done with tape, but we did our perimeter around the card. Oh, that's just going to drive me crazy, so let me just throw them away right now. One more. Okay. All right, so then I like to put a second row of tape that is right at the edge. So when I fold it over, then that edge grabs really nice and tight and holds it down. Now, there's not enough space on here to put another row, but I still need something on the edge, right? So you can do that a number of ways. You can glue, get this off and then put some regular glue on there if you want. Here's what I like to do. If I'm using double stick tape on it, I'm just going to stick with the double stick tape, but I'm going to take the paper off my first row, because then my second row can overlap it a little bit if it's needed, even just a tiny, tiny bit. It might be halfway across it, depending on how wide or thin, how narrow your extra space is there to wrap around. So Now I don't have to worry about the one that's already down there. Now I'm using as my guide the edge of the paper, and it is for sure going across the top of the other one. No worries, because it's double stick. It'll stick to the tape, and it will stick when I take the top off. They'll both stick to the spine. So no worries at all. Got some kind of funky ends, so I'm going over the edge, and I'll just cut those off. All right, here's the third one. Yeah, sometimes I do this and it's just barely over the edge of the other one. Sometimes, like this, you just don't have very much space to deal with. It's a very small hallway there, so they're going to overlap quite a bit. So I'm going to cut these ends off. And now I got a little tape stuck to my scissors. Hate when that happens. Really do. Okay, set that down. All right, and now I'm going to take the paper off of the one I just put on. Easier to start from the inside. And I find these super pointy scissors work really well for that. Also a pokey tool, seems to work pretty well. Something super thin, super pointy that can go in there. Okay, let's take these away. Let's move this out of the way. We'll put that back over here and just get a little bit of space. Okay, so now I'm going to roll this around, and you can see how it's already starting to stick to the side as I rolled it around, but this paper's pretty thin. Again, it's thicker than cardstock, but it's thinner than the book board or chipboard that I used to make the book. Okay, get the other side. It really does roll better if you go first like this and just give it a little bit, a gentle nudge to start it rolling that direction. All right, and then the two ends, I'm going to push this down, and then let me fold this over. I should have a very nice fold in the corner, and if there's something sticking out, I often just trim it up. Okay, I'll give that one a little bend, but I want to stick this little piece down and this little piece down right there. Okay. Alrighty, so that is done and ready to go. I do seem to have, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab a bone folder, and I'm going to come to the corners, and I'm just going to smash them a little bit, because you've got multiple layers of paper right there in the corners, and so they tend to kind of stick up, and I want it to glue really flat, if I can, to the book. Oh, tape all over this thing. Got some little ends just kind of sticking out, so I'm gonna just trim those off a bit. Add it to the sticky tape on the scissors. There we go. That'll work. All right, have to clean those off. Okay, so that is ready to go, and I can really choose which end I want to be top or bottom. I like this little the text up here that's peeking through. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put some holes in here so that we can sew our signatures in. And we're going to do just a basic 3-hole pamphlet stitch. And this is the spine that we want to sew all 3 signatures into. Just like this one. here was the spine. I haven't covered or anything so you could still see it. And we're sewing all 3 signatures into that, and then we're going to glue that down to the book itself. All right, so there's a couple of different ways to do that, and when in the live, when we did that one, I just went to center of this one and made a hole, and then made the other holes in here, and then we used this as the template to put on our signatures and make the holes directly in there. Today I'm going to show you a different way to do that, and that is using a template. The template needs to be the same size as this spine, and that's 2.5 by 8.5, and it's something that you could keep and use over and over again. So just, you know, like a cardstock that's going to hold up to a little bit would be good. So I'm going to pretend like this is my spine then, and I'm working off of this. And the first, I'll show you the easiest way. So if you really want to make sure that your holes are in the absolute right place, I really just eyeball it a lot. Because, you know, after you do it a bunch of times, it really gets pretty easy to eyeball it. So I'm going to lay this right down the center, and I'm putting it at 1 or at 0, and the other end it's at 8.5. Okay, so I want to find the center. The center of 8.5 inches is going to be 4 1/4. There's 4 1/4, so I'm going to put a mark there. Oops, a little far over. And I'm going to come straight across and put a mark right there. Hopefully that's about right. Okay. And then you could turn this over, line up those 2 marks, and draw a line across. Okay, there's your center line. Now, you're not really worrying about these dots that you made. They were just to find the center of the paper. Okay, but that line is your center. And then we want to go about 1 inch down from the top and about 1 inch up from the bottom. So let's put this back on here. And it's perfect at 4 1/4 right there. Okay, so 8.5, about 1 inch down would be about 7.5. So if I make a mark at 7.5 and come across the other side, make a mark at 7.5. Okay, and then down here from 0, if I make a mark at 1, and on the other side at 1. This is for people who want to make sure that their holes are absolutely perfectly aligned. Then you come back here. And you know, it's not a bad idea to do that too if you want to make a template and keep the template and use it over and over again. Really not a bad idea to do that. Okay, so there's the line there, and then we're going to make a line down here. And maybe it's just getting lazy after doing it a bunch of times and eyeballing it. I don't know. First time it's totally off, ski-lumpus, I'll be going back to a template for sure. Okay, I'm going to erase these little dots just so they don't throw me off, because now I do need to make dots. Okay, so now I need the actual center point left to right. That center point will be where my center signature is going to be sewn in. Okay, so this is 2.5. Then half of 2.5 is going to be 1 1/4. So that is the actual center point of the paper left to right of our template, and I'm going to go up to this line and do the same thing, 1 1/4. And I'm going to go down to the bottom line and do the same thing, 1 1/4. And then I'm going to draw a line top to bottom, connecting all these dots. Okay, and then I need the left and right. So now I've got 1 1/4 is the mark right there. So, but I'm just going to bring it over and move it to the center, make the center my 0 mark. So I've got 1 1/4, half of 1 1/4 is, what, 3/4? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, nope. Half of 1 1/4. Oh, that's going to get a little more complicated. I can figure it out on the ruler pretty easily, but I'm trying to find a way to say it so it'll be easy for you. So, there really is no easy way. So you can do this. Half of 1 is a half. Okay, and then I've got a quarter. Half of a quarter is an 1/8. So if I take the half plus another 1/8, that's the center point of this one. And it's going to be the same over here. A 1/2 inch plus an 1/8. Okay, and then I need that same mark on all 3 lines. Try not to get my head in there, but still be able to see. Okay, a 1/2 inch plus a quarter. You see why I erased those dots? Because I didn't want them to look like they were these dots. Okay, a 1/2 inch plus an 1/8 is that middle. Over here, a 1/2 inch plus an 1/8 is right here. Making these bigger because the others are kind of sort of still there. And let's move this over. So we've got 1 1/4. So a 1/2 inch plus an 1/8. There's our center over there. Okay. So we're going to, you don't actually have to connect these dots into a line because these dots are where your holes are going to be. That's exactly where you're going to sew. And over here, it's kind of sticking to the silicone mat because it's off the edge and doesn't want to move. Okay, there we go. All right, so there's our template. And our template tells us if we're going to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and you could use this if you were putting in 1 signature or 2 signatures or 3, or I believe that there's room to put 2 more on here. You could actually use it as a template for 5 signatures, but you could also make this a little bit wider in order to do that. But you just have to make sure that you're getting to the center point to begin with. You've got to get to the center point. Okay, so if I have 3 signatures, and get that out of the way completely, and they are going to be sewn, here's the 3 holes for signature 1, the 3 holes for signature 2, and the 3 holes for signature 3. Excuse me, let me grab an awl. Sticking to the silicone mat. I'm going to go ahead and, where is my book? I always have an old book around if I think I'm going to be making holes so that I don't make holes in my nice silicone mat. It's a new Tim Holtz media mat. I'd sure hate to destroy it. So there's our center hole. Okay, so I'm just going to make a hole in here. I'm going to put a hole in all 9 of these spots. And if you do that, then your template is ready to go over and over again. Okay. See, by making the line across, that helps me to make sure that I'm making the 3 holes horizontally even, and they don't end up like this, you know, with the holes kind of ski-wampus there. That one's not very big. Okay, so that should work just fine. All right, so now if I take this and I put it on onto my spine, I know exactly where to make the holes to sew that my signature's in. Now, you can either go straight to it like this with the awl, Or you can take a pencil, these retractable pencils are great, and go in the hole and just make some dots like that. This is typically a little easier, especially if it's your first time, because you can hold the paper down while you're doing this. When you start poking it, the paper tends to move a little bit more. Okay, see there, I've got 9 holes. I know exactly where they're supposed to be, so it doesn't matter which one I start with. I'll just start making these holes in here. And let's see here. Then I'm going to do the same thing on my paper, my signatures, and actually I'm only going to put 1 row of holes in them, but because I'm going to use the same template and because it's the same height as my papers in my signature, then even though that isn't on top of the spine here, I'm doing this alone because it's a little bit thicker, so it's a little bit harder to do. A hard time seeing, there's a little bit of glare over there. Because I'm using the same template, then the holes should be lined up perfectly when I go to sew them in. You can also take your Crop-a-dile and punch these holes right here. You do not have to do it with an awl, but I know a lot of people don't have the Crop-a-dile. The small one may not fit here to get into the holes that you need. It may not go far enough into the paper, and so it would take the Crop-a-dile Big Bite that'll go into a 12-inch piece of paper all the way to the center. Now I need to remember which is top and which is bottom. So as you make the template, it is helpful to write top up here and bottom down here, because if the top and bottom, if you turn it around and you make the holes in the signature with this, and it happens to be slightly off or different than the top, your holes might not line up. So I know that I've put the text up at the top here on my spine, so that's going to remain my top. And now I have marked my template as to top and bottom, so I should be good to go there. So now I'm going to grab my signature, and let me see if I can grab a piece of cardstock quickly without taking much time. Something that would go with that botanical let's see, oops, I don't know why I didn't even think to get that before, but I would like to put them on because it is helpful using it as an idea book. It's helpful to have that front and back cover to be able to add more pockets and things on. So I think I've got, that one's paper, I think I've got a cardstock botanical paper pack in here that I could probably find something in, and that's what I'm just glancing through here. There's a couple of different things. Okay, let's see if we can find something in here. This is a nice botanical pack that doesn't even belong to it. Some stickers. It's not super heavy. It isn't super heavy, but it still would make a decent cover. So that actually would be a nice one. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty. Oh, the leather is pretty cool. Let's see what's here. Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. That would be a real pretty front of a signature. I hope that wasn't a horrible sound tearing that off. he's kind of cool, but he would end up in the back. So would that dragonfly. He's pretty cool. There's another good one. That would be in the front. Okay, and then let me go back to these butterflies that were right at the beginning. Okay. We'll do that. All right, so then the other thing you want to do is look at your 3 signatures and decide which one's going to be your first signature, your second signature, and your third signature. I need to, maybe I can do that. I'm probably just going to bind one so that you can see it. I really would like to keep this fairly short so that if you want to pause it, go back and look at something that went too fast, you can. All right, this one has dragonflies here. So let's see. I'll do this one with that one. And this one with this. There we go. Okay, so this is the one we're going to use. Should have had that ready before. Sorry about that little delay. I'm going to grab the paper trimmer and trim. Get these scissors away. Not sure I'll need those. I'm going to go ahead and trim up this. Well, we'll need the awl, so let me keep that handy. Okay, so there is something that I do like to keep in mind when I'm trimming this to be the cover of a signature. All the pages inside are 8.5 by 11. When they are folded with 10 pages, the ones in the center are going to come out a little bit more. Okay, so I like to allow, and if you do less, say you do 6 pages in a signature, you're not going to have that. But with 10 you will. So when I make this the cover, I want to allow, if I can, if there's enough on it, if it's a long enough piece, I like to allow enough that it can come out to cover those pieces that are all the way out there. So if this is 11 wide and this is 12, it doesn't usually need to be 12, but that, and of course I wasn't holding it tight, but let's see here. This is the part we want to be on there, so let's just make it 8.5 high. I'll go 8.5 plus maybe a 1/16 of an inch, just so it's just barely higher than the papers inside it, just so it really kind of sets apart the signature and is easy for me to find. Okay, and these are 11, this is 12. I might not even need to trim it up, but I'm going to do it in the center, and then if I need to trim it up, I can later. I can take a little bit off of each of these edges that are exactly the same. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. So I want to make sure that it's the 8.5 high and, 11 to 12 width-wise. All right, so get my signature pages all good to go, left to right, top to bottom. So if some of them, they're not all exactly the same size, they weren't exactly the same kind of paper either. So, and then I'm going to center this, and all that means is I know I've got some excess, so I'm going to put, try to put about the same amount on the left and the right. So this space over here, it's not quite a finger's width on both, so that's pretty well centered. And then top to bottom, just trying to make sure that they're kind of all together and one corner isn't off going, completely out there. And then it is very helpful if you clip them together, paper clip, binder clip, any kind of clip. I picked these clips up at Dollar Tree. I think they were a pack of 6 for $1.25 now, sorry. Yeah, everything at Dollar Tree is $1.25 now. And they actually work quite well. So, what I didn't do was fold them all first to get that crease down the middle to know where we're poking the hole. And you don't have to. So if I want to make sure it's centered, and I'm going to take my ruler, and this should be 11. Well, this piece is shorter than 11, so I'm going to take 11. Let's see. I'm going to take 11 from out here on these papers to out here. From the outside of the farthest out to the outside of the farthest out over here is 11. So that means some of them are just a hair shorter. Okay, so I know that 8 and a half, or 11, half of 11 is 5 and a half, right? So there's 5 and a half, there's my mark. There's my center mark, what I do with my pencil. I'm just going to do it in pencil so that I can erase it. So there's my center mark right there. That would be my center hole. And I only put 3 holes in this. Remember, 1, 2, 3 for a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Okay, so I'm going to take my template. I'm going to take my template and make sure that the top is at the top. And I'm going to stick my pencil in the hole of the center one, which is where I want this center one, just to make sure that I'm getting it on my on my paper, on my dot that I put on there. Now, what I didn't do when I made that dot was align it top to bottom, and it just happens to be exactly right, top to bottom. So there is my center hole. I'm marking that. Just drew that in there. Left to right, top to bottom, that is my center hole. And I only want 1 row in here. I don't want all 3. So I'm going to mark the top in the center. I'm going to mark the bottom in the center, because all I want to do here is make 3 holes for the center of each signature. Okay, this is the center signature. It's going to get sewn right there, right down the center. All right, so now let me bring my awl back. My book that I can poke into, and my awl, there's my center hole right there. So I'm just going to go through, and again, if you have a Crop-a-dile Big Bite, you can use your Crop-a-dile Big Bite to just punch you a hole right down the center. Once I can feel that I'm into the book, I know I've gone through all of them. And I don't want to go round and round and make that a giant hole. And if I do it with the Crop-a-dile Big Bite or another cutting tool, I tend to use the smaller of the two. I believe it's a 1/8. Okay, so let's get this hole in here. And if I'm stuck into the book, I'm not, but I am through. I can feel that I'm through. But if I'm stuck into the book, then I know for sure I'm through. All right, and here's our 3rd hole. Pretty easy to go through these because they're just, plain paper. Yeah, nothing heavy, nothing thick. And this is a very, very lightweight cardstock, if I even call it cardstock. Okay, so now you want a needle to be able to sew with. A bookbinding needle, a giant needle is great because you like a big eye. It does not need to be sharp because you've already made holes. And I'm going to take this thread, and a wax thread works great. You could use dental floss, you could use embroidery floss, you can use a lot of things, really any kind, just not too thick of a twine. If you have a thin twine or a thin string like this, the test, I believe, is to take it like this and go like that. If you do that and it breaks, don't use it. It's not going to hold. But if you're pulling on, if you grab it and you just, give it a good yank like that, and it doesn't break, it's sturdy enough to use for a book. All right, so you can measure and cut this off. And if you do that, you basically take your thread and go the length. And I always go way over because I'd much rather have too much than not enough, because you can't add it back on. Go 1, 2, 3, and then I throw in a little bit for good measure and cut it right there. Or, as was brought up in the live the other day, you do not have to cut it off. You can just leave it attached and sew this and then cut it as soon as you're done. All right, the reason I like a giant needle is so that I have a giant eye to put that through. Okay, all right, so here's how we bind it, and it's super, super easy. And we're going to bind it to our hidden spine. Okay, we're going to go down the center. When we go down the center, we're going to go down the center of the spine as well. So down the center. And if you did cut your string off, then just make sure that you leave a nice long tail up here. A nice long tail out here, so that when you are pulling it through, you don't accidentally pull the tail through and have to start over. Okay, so we went down the center. It is a little more awkward leaving the string attached. Whoops, sorry about that. I did not mean to smack the camera with my hand as I brought it up with the thread. All right. I'm going to, well, I was gonna clip the spine right there on, but I'm not going to, because you need to look at it just to make sure you're in the right hole. All right, so we went down this, you know what, it's going to be much more difficult for you to see if it's attached, so I am going to detach it with my sticky double stick scissors now. Okay, so we went down the center, and I'm going to leave a nice long tail up at the top. Okay, down the center, and now we're going up the bottom or the top. It doesn't matter, it works either way, but let's go up the bottom. So we need to, down the center, we need to start with the spine it's being attached to, up the bottom. This is the bottom of the page, and this is the top of the page. Make sure that you are in the center hole. Get it through the spine, and then we'll get it through all the paper as well. Okay, so we went down the center, we're coming up the bottom. I'll just pull this through. Does not need to be tight. We'll tighten it up later. Okay, makes no difference. So I just want to make sure this tail is still out here. So I came up the bottom. Now I'm going to go down the top. So I'm going right past the center, going down the top and into the center hole. Again, make sure you're in the center hole of your spine. Pull that through. Okay, and then we're going to come up the center. Now, as you come up the center, this is why you don't worry about it being tight, so that you can pull this away to see. Try not to split the string or split the thread as you come up the center. Okay, try to come up next to it, not through it. Okay, and then I want one of, now I can take it right off of the needle, doesn't matter, and because we're done stitching through. I want one of each of the tails to be on each side of this center string that we just put through there. Okay, so we went down the center, up the bottom, down the top, and back up the center. And here's my two tails. Now I want to make sure that it's good and tight. So now I'm going to turn it over here. They're not very tight, and I want to make sure that this is tight to my signature. So I will just grab hold of these string, and I'm going to give it a little pull, and mostly it's these two. These are the two that are attached to that on the bottom. Okay, pull those two. And then I'm just going to take these two and tie a knot. Now, how many times you tie this knot is up to you, and how much you think it's going to take for it to hold and never come apart. I always give it 2. Some people only give it 1, and they swear that the string will stay, and it might. I don't know. I don't know what kind of string they're using, but I just know that one round is not a knot. It's half of a knot, and I'm always afraid it'll come off. So I always give it 2, and I typically give it a 3rd for good measure. So now I will cut the strings off. I'm going to leave them both longer than the book. I'm going to let them dangle down here until I decide exactly what I want to do with them. Now, I cut a long piece off of that. I wanted to make sure that I had enough, and if you go way overboard like that and you cut too much off, hang on to this, because this will bind 2 mini books easily. Okay, so there is that signature bound to the hidden spine. Now I can bend them all right there, and you could bend them before. It really doesn't matter. There's so many things that don't matter. People are all worried about, what if this and what if that. I'm just trying to put it against something to, and maybe you don't want a nice flat crease back there. Maybe you want it to stay nice and rounded so that it'll stay open with all the things in it. So now see, this is 12 inches. And there's a little bit of extra space, but not a ton. The signature's inside, so I might trim that up a little bit, but I don't have to a ton. Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. Ralph Waldo Emerson. That's a nice thought. So then I'm going to take the other 2 signatures. I'm going to bind the first signature here exactly the same way. The second signature here. I'm sorry, the 3rd signature there, exactly the same way. And then I'm going to get my book cover, and I'm going to put wet glue. I do not use double stick tape for this. I will put a wet glue all the way around here and cover it with wet glue. I do stay away from the holes. I don't want the glue to go into the holes and come out oozing over here, and then I see it, or it sticks to the paper, and then the paper sticks here. I don't want any of that. So I make lines up and down, and I go between the circles, or the holes there, but I don't go over the holes. I just don't want that glue going through. Once I have the first signature and the 3rd signature bound in here, so I've got all 3, then I will put that glue on the back, and then it's time to bring this over. Make sure you've got the top of the book. This is easy to spot because I've already put a ring on it. And if you want to put a ring or an eyelet, now's the time to do it before you glue this in. If possible, you can do it after, but it's just a whole lot easier if you do it now. And then I'm going to take this, and it's the same width as the spine, remember, 2.5. So I'm just going to line it up left to right exactly with the spine, and then top to bottom I'm just going to center it on this piece of paper. I'm just going to center it so it has the same amount of space top to bottom. And when all 3 signatures are in there, you can't see that spine at all, top or bottom. Okay, now let me grab the one that we already did. So if that's open, you just don't see the spine, the top or bottom, the hidden spine that we put in there. Now, if I go to the front or the back, I can look and see, and I know that that's the hidden spine right there. My paper, I need to ink my paper a little bit right on a couple of spots there. But I can see that's where I glued it in, and so I know that that's there, and that was my hidden spine. So this is where a lot of people will put either a piece of decorative paper or a piece of washi tape or a piece of a strip of lace. This one might be pretty with a strip of gold on both sides right there, and then a strip of gold down both sides of the spine. But that's what a lot of people will do to cover that, is put some, and this is not super junky, but if it was a true junk journal, then some really old vintage lace and things sticking out here would be very, very pretty. Okay, so that's how you can cover that up. But then, yeah, you are bound in then. And you've got these right here. You can either cut them off short right here, so they just stay right there and out of the way. You can leave them long, and you can attach charms to them, or punch out of coordinating paper some little shapes, and then glue 2 shapes together with the thread inside of it. And that's a cute little dingle. That would be just like this. Just 2 little circles, because there was a lot of circles in here, the lights and the moon. And, you know, I'm leaving these to just decide if there's something I want to do with them later, because I don't know. And if I don't, in the end, I can just cut them off. No big deal. No big deal at all. So that is ready to go. And as soon as I bind the first and third signature in here, then I can glue it in. And this one is ready to go as well. And that will be complete. And you will have made a journal start to finish. 3 signature, hidden spine, hidden binding. I've heard people call it both ways, but 3 signature, hardcover, 3 signature, hidden binding journal, start to finish. And you'll see that you can do it, and you can make any kind now. Now that you've done that, you've got a good basis to make any kind. The journal is made start to finish. However, there is still the decorating of it. So if you are in Happy Paper People, then we have been doing mass makes every Thursday afternoon. We're halfway through the year now. We've been doing them this year. So you could go back to every Thursday for the first half of the year and pull out 20 some. One of each one. Just take out one of each mass make to put in your journal for your idea book. And then we've still got another 20 some weeks coming up for the rest of the year. So in the end, you'll have 52 items from the mass makes alone to put in here. And then we've made some things on some Mondays, and we've made some things on Saturday Night Live. So Monday Jumpstart and Saturday Night Live are often different type of things that we do. So we don't make something like that every single time. But there were plenty of them where we did. So go grab one of those as well, and you'll probably have, you should have, 35, 40 or more. Actually, with the doilies, we did one day 10 different ways to use doilies. We did 15. I think we did 15 one-sheet wonders with 12 by 12 paper. If you take one of each of those, there's 15, and that was from one Monday Jumpstart. And 10 doilies, different ways to use them in journals, and that was only a start. So there's 10 right there. Between those 2 days, you've got 25 elements to decorate your journal with. So you can see how quickly you can fill up your idea book, and you'll need more than one. So if you're making one along with us, I'm going to suggest that everybody use it as their idea book, so we can totally fill it up. And it's nice to keep that first one that you ever made, because you can look back at it, and if you think, oh, it's horrible, I don't want to keep it, then that's definitely a good reason to keep it, so that you can look back at it and see how far you've come as you make more and more journals, and you see your progress and how much better you get each step of the way. And then you see other things that you've learned, a little more difficult types of binding, or different elements that you put in. So it is nice to see your progress. It's nice to see where you came from and what you're doing now. So thanks for joining me. If you did this along with me, or you would like to see more of it and see photos of what everybody else in the lives has been making, come on to Happy Paper People in Facebook. We have a private group, Happy Paper People, and if you will answer the questions, come on in, join us there, and post your pictures. We support all artists, and love to see the pictures of the things that you're working on. And we also have a public page, have Happy Paper People, and I think that name's going to change tomorrow just a little bit, so that there's some differentiation between the two of them. But because we're working on some big stuff in Happy Paper People, we are growing and expanding, and we've got some big things going on right now. So make sure that you come on over and like and follow the page, join the Facebook group. And definitely subscribe here on YouTube, because this is where we make announcements and have celebrations and have Saturday Night Live Laugh and Crafts and do live tutorials and recorded tutorials and sales. We do some great sales here. We do all kinds of stuff on YouTube. So make sure that you subscribe and then hit the notification bell up to the top so that it will notify you anytime we have something new come out for YouTube, because there's a lot of what we do goes on here in YouTube. So, but as I mentioned, we're working on some big things right now. We are expanding. I've been working behind the scenes this week, creating some new things for Happy Paper People. So pretty excited about where we're going with some of that. So thanks for joining me. Hope you have the rest of a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.